Women make up 70% of the healthcare workforce, but only 20% of its leadership. On Her Story, we'll explore the careers of bold and influential women from Silicon Valley to Capitol Hill and learn how they've overcome the odds. This is Her Story, a program where we explore what's beyond the glass ceiling.
Hi, I'm Joanne Conroy, President and CEO of Dartmouth Health, and welcome to Her Story. We are really thrilled today to have Sian Beilock, who is the current President of Barnard College and President-Elect of Dartmouth College. She's a nationally recognized cognitive scientist. But really what's most interesting about her is her leadership journey. So thank you for joining us, Sian.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
So you've accomplished a lot in a pretty short period of time. Talk about kind of when you started on this leadership journey.
Well, I think I've always had elements of what I have done that have been leadership in nature. Growing up, I played a lot of sports. I was often a team captain. When I was a professor at the University of Chicago, I led a big lab, and I had about 20 students and postdocs. And in that way, that was leadership. That was learning how to manage others and learning that what excited me most was when I was able to bring smart groups of people together to get to answers that none of us could get to individually, and that you can't manage everyone the same way. And I look back to that. I didn't know it at the time, but I was getting excited and learning what it meant to be a leader in those situations.
So making a jump from a very busy role at the University of Chicago to President of Barnard, talk about that, because that's a big jump. This jump from cultures from Chicago to New York, jump across the country, changing your kind of support network because you'd been at Chicago for a while, and jumping into a role that there are a lot of different skills that were required for success.
Yeah, well, I think, when you're looking at anyone who has been in leadership situations, I think it's important to dive under the surface, so to speak. At Chicago, in my last several years, I was executive vice provost. I was running a big portfolio that crossed many of our academic departments, our graduate school. And so I was really getting experience leading at an institutional level. And then I wasn't looking to make a switch. I was pretty happy in my role. But one thing I've learned in my life is that you don't get to pick when your opportunities come. And I got called about the job at Barnard, and I was really just struck by what a singular institution it was. It was a college focused on women, a small, tight-knit school focused on the liberal arts, but it had connections to the larger Columbia University. And so I thought that was great, to empower women and to be part of the larger university, what could be better? And so I jumped.
What was it about Barnard that made you jump? I think whenever we make jumps for several different reasons. Aside from the tight-knit institution, was there anything else there? Was it a new area of the country? Or, we always like kind of new starts too in our career, and this took your activities in a different direction.
Yeah, well, I think there's actually many similarities between Chicago and Barnard. They are both focused on academic excellence. Our faculty are doing research at the highest levels. Our faculty are all tenured at Barnard and Columbia. But the idea of being at a place that was expressly focused on empowering women was really exciting. And also being a place that hadn't, I thought, told its story in an accurate way about the power it had across women in STEM. And frankly, to be able to really be at the head as CEO of an entire institution. I'd experienced that in terms of my portfolio at Chicago, whether I was overseeing our press or our arts center, or our professional theater, or the graduate schools. I'd experienced that, but to be really responsible and at the head of an independent institution was attractive to me.
Talk a little bit about empowering women. Most of our viewers, although not all, are women, many in young women that are just beginning their careers, but a lot of senior women that like to listen to other people's journeys. So talk a little bit about what you've been able to do to elevate the power and the accomplishments of women in your tenure at Barnard?
Yeah, I mean, first I would say that I've really taken it upon myself to write op-eds and to be out there as a voice for issues around women, and I think Barnard is a great platform to do that. So it's not just in an educational sphere, whether it's women in the workplace or how we think about what it means to have self-doubt that women often have. I just had a piece in Fortune last week about that. And embracing the fact that self-doubt can actually be really powerful. I try and have a voice out there in a broad way. And the other thing that, I do is with all of my students and alums on campus and off campus, I think it's really talking about the fact that this journey is not linear and setting up programs that support that. So at Barnard, we've set up an entire office and initiative called Beyond Barnard that's designed to support students as they think about their career journey when they're at Barnard, but also our 40,000 alums as they think about their career journey through their life. And we know women go in and out of the workforce. We know women have to acquire different skills. And I really do think universities have a responsibility to be lifelong supporters of education. And this is especially true for women. So we've tried to sort of model that with how we talk about it, but also in terms of the systems we have in place. And I'm excited because Beyond Barnard, about a third of its users are alums, which I think is really special.
Yeah, that's really unique and powerful. I would say you are absolutely correct that women sometimes take circuitous journeys. And we ask all of our interviewees whether or not they're an accidental or intentional leader. So what category do you think you fall into?
Yeah, I read that question. I thought it was great. And I guess like a true scientist, I'm going to say I'm probably both. I think it's hard really to categorize as one or the other. First of all, I think no one's path is linear. And what I would argue differentiates me from other people I've seen is that I'm willing to move and take jumps and step out of what is comfortable. And I think not everyone wants to do that, which is fine. And I certainly seek out opportunities to learn more. I really love getting opinions that challenge how I think. And so in those ways, you could say I'm very intentional in what I do, but no one plans their career journey down to the T. And I think it's a misnomer to argue that's the case. And you can always tie it back and tell a story from looking back. And so I worry sometimes when we talk about intentional leaders that people think that they have to have it all planned out. And I would argue that one of the things that differentiates the best leaders and the most successful from those who are not is that they're taking unexpected opportunities when they come, and also when they don't get what they want. Like failure is a big part of my life. It's a big part of every leader's life. And if we can't get up and turn in a different direction or figure out how we're going to wipe our knees off and go move somewhere else, like that makes it impossible to go in new directions.
I do counsel women that they have to take a level of personal and professional risk if they really want leadership. And that's the first hurdle for them to overcome. I'm struck, though, by the definition of failure. I think a lot of people think it's a very public thing, but often failure can be, just as you said, just not getting what you want. Things don't necessarily fall in the direction that you expect them to go. And it's kind of managing that. Talk about maybe an example where kind of you lived through that. You didn't really get what you wanted.
I have so many examples from my life. Like I feel like every day I don't get what I want with something. I'll say it started early though. Like I played soccer at a really high level in the Olympic development program, and I didn't make the national team. And I was like, my whole identity was really around that and being successful at sports. And it made me, one, realize that I can't have my whole identity around one thing. And two, that like, I don't have to just play sports to be successful. And I went on to get a PhD. One of my PhDs is in kinesiology and sports psychology, studying sports, right? And so I would say that was one of the first places where I learned how to take kind of a different step. And then it's been, all along the way, I, didn't get all the jobs I wanted when I was a professor. Um, there were certain positions in the leadership at the University of Chicago that I didn't get. And then I took different directions. Now, not all the time people knew I was up for those positions, and that's part of the personal failure. But I wanted them. And, I just moved in a different direction or thought about what I needed to do next. And, it's worked out. I think, there's lots of different paths that would have also been fine. But it is I think it's really this idea, and it's so easy to be hard on ourselves. We're like our own worst critics. And I talk a lot about how the most important conversation we ever have is with ourselves. And we tend to not be self-compassionate. This is especially true for women. And we have to be able to talk to ourselves and push ourselves like we would push a good friend. And that means, when we don't get what we want, stepping back. I usually give myself a night or a couple hours to ruminate, and then I'm done.
Yeah, there's an art. There's an art to putting it in a box and putting it on a shelf and not revisiting it. So,
yeah, or my research shows, and my colleagues, and I write about this in my book, Choke, that, there are techniques to deal with that. It's hard to put it on a shelf, right? So you give yourself 10 minutes to write it down in your journal, and then you close the journal. Or then the next time when you think about it, instead of dwelling on the failure, you think about one or two things you can control next time around. And it turns out that actually changes how the brain functions, so that we're focused on what we can do and want to do rather than revisiting the past. And that's actually really helpful for getting us moving forward.
Yeah. So let's talk about your move. You're President-Elect of Dartmouth College. And before we talk about that, what are you going to miss about leaving Manhattan? I'm going to tell you that there's no Grubhub up here and there's no Uber, so get ready.
I really love the city. I think there's an energy that comes along with it. And I love Barnard. Like, being at Barnard has been really special to me. So I will miss both of those. But I'm excited for a new adventure. I'm really excited to be at a university that brings together the medical system along with the business and engineering, and just a real focus and import of undergraduate liberal arts education. I think there's not many models of universities that do that well, and Dartmouth can really lead there. And I'm excited for more outdoors and just to have it to do something different.
Yeah. This is a place where you can actually be hiking and kayaking and biking 5 minutes outside of work. So we definitely make it easy for people to be active. So let's talk about moving to a new institution. A number of people say you don't change anything except the ink in the inkwells the first 6 months. But that's kind of an old perception of how you enter an organization. As you counsel people, how do you counsel people to make that shift?
Yeah, I've now done it with Barnard, and I'll do it again with Dartmouth. And first of all, I think having that experience is invaluable, because there are different cultural norms, and you're not there to completely change an institution. You're there to take what's best about an institution and move it forward as a leader. And so for me, the biggest part of the shift is just learning and listening. I didn't realize when I came to Barnard how blind I would be coming in, because when I shifted into leadership at Chicago, I'd been a faculty member. So I knew who to talk to. I knew what the institutional history was. I knew that who screamed all the time and when you really had to listen to someone who was speaking loudly. And what I hadn't really anticipated at Barnard was that I wouldn't have that knowledge. Like, you have to learn who to listen to. And so I'm a scientist, so I think about converging evidence. And I'm a big fan of asking lots of people the same questions and trying to get to where the end result is. And so I'm already doing that at Dartmouth. I'm listening and learning, and I have a lot more to do, but I think that is the most important thing coming into an institution. And then it's really figuring out what are the low-hanging fruit, what are the longer-term plans, and how you're going to pull on the DNA of an institution to push it forward.
Yeah. All really important observations, and we'll keep you busy for sure. There's There's a lot of DNA up here. So, but everybody is really enthusiastic about your arrival. Talk a little bit about what advice you would give your younger self, because we do have a lot of younger, early career women that listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I mean, I think that I would say be nicer to yourself. Like, that's a big one. And again, it's like, I really do think from graduate school on, I learned this, that success is not about you doing it all. It's about figuring out where you pull in experts and how you can do something that cognitive psychologists talk about as distributed cognition, right? Our thinking doesn't all have to happen in our own brain. It can happen across brains. And so it's figuring out who your great thinking partners are, who you can rely on and call to get answers to questions, and then moving forward. And I think I've seen this in many young people coming up through the system, and especially women, I would argue. We often feel like we have to do everything ourselves. And that's not what great leaders do, in my opinion. They know who to bring in, they know how to build the team around them, and they know how to ask for help.
Yeah, you're right. Women don't often ask for help and don't create kind of a council of advisors outside their current environment. And that's actually very powerful. If outside of Barnard and outside of University of Chicago and outside of Dartmouth, who do you regard as your kind of council of advisors? So you're still building it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty meticulous about this. Like, I have Excel spreadsheets of people I feel like I need to touch base with, like every 6 months or every 3 months. Certainly other academic leaders, like other presidents or people who have been presidents, several people who lead companies in the business world, like outside. And frankly, like for whatever issue I have, I figure out who's the most expert and call them, like get a connection and call them. So whether it's thinking about real estate or thinking about how we should think about something invested in the endowment, like what I feel like I can do is get to people who I can get an opinion from and get an opinion that allows me to ask the most important questions of the people that are working for me.
Yeah. Have you ever received any advice that you thought was really bad? Because not every piece of advice is applicable to this situation.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's one of the big important things to remember. Like, you don't have to do everything everyone tells you to. Like, you have to sort of figure out where your gut is taking you. And once you've collected the evidence, and you're going to move in wrong directions at some point. But you don't have, just because you're getting the advice doesn't mean you have to listen to it. And I think oftentimes we, again, especially as women trying to please those around us, like think we have to do what everyone says. And it's about hearing the advice, especially if it's critical of what you're doing, which I think is really, really important. And then deciding how much you're going to take of it, what you're going to believe of it. Like, one of my mentors said to me, look, it's really, really great to have lawyers around you who are telling you exactly what they think and what should happen. But remember, you don't always have to listen to them. Like, it's just an example. Like, this idea that you're freed from always having to do what everyone around you is saying is like, it's very powerful. I listen to the lawyers most times, by the way.
Well, we have conversations. We want our legal counsel, who is amazing, to be our partners and not our policemen, which is it's a very fine line. And they seem to resonate with that. They really want a partnership.
And, I take a lot from my background in psychology, but there's something we talk about called source monitoring, like who said the information that you're getting, because it's not just important the information, it's also important who's saying it. So if you're getting information about something that you should or shouldn't be doing in the legal realm, for example, it matters much more if a lawyer is saying it than your VP of finance, right? Because the lawyer's the one with the expertise. And I think we sometimes don't pair those together, who's saying it and what they're saying. And it's that conjunction that ends up being really important.
Yeah. Yeah. And very important as you manage your board. And I think a lot of people don't appreciate that we work for our boards.
Yeah, my board is my boss. Like, my daughter says to me, like, who's your boss? I'm like, oh, that 32 people right there.
and managing the board and in a very positive way, communicating with them, keeping them up to date, but also using their expertise in a way that uses them strategically and not operationally is a skill.
Yeah, I mean, it's boards are tricky, right? I mean, they're there to help you govern, not manage, and it's very easy to fall into the latter. And it's a responsibility on the CEO side as well as the board side. But I fully believe that if CEOs and the people that work for them are not bringing the board in at the right level, it's, that's our fault, right? And so we have to bring the board in on our strategic journey so that they can help us at a strategic level. And what that means, which is very hard to do, is we have to give boards our mental model of what's happening. We have to put it out there so they can react to it because they're not there in everyday life the way we are. And I think it's a really hard skill to master, to bring them up to speed and then give them the right mental model so they can ask questions at the right level and push at the right level.
Yeah, and they can be incredible resources when you have boards that have people that are in other industries and have different governance models and are actually enhance your leadership. And
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to this idea of distributed cognition, right? Getting other people to be the thinking folks with you, right? And I consider the board to be an example of calling on experts to think through things, to like challenge. I mean, the best ideas come when we are challenged, when people think differently than us. Whether we change our mind or not, it's going to help us crystallize what we're arguing and what we're thinking and how we're communicating. And sometimes we'll also change our mind too.
so last question before we finish up, because I know you have a really busy afternoon. So talk a little bit about personally. I know that you and your daughter are moving up to Hanover, and um, uh, what are you most looking forward to as a family, not having anything to do with work? And what is she specifically looking forward to doing?
Um, well, she visited the middle school and really liked the cafeteria, so that's good.
The food is great up here.
I think this idea that there's just a little for her, like a little more freedom to be out and about and walk to town, and that's exciting. Like them being in a city where things are more constrained in that way. And I'm really just looking to being in a community that takes care of each other, to being part of that, and to being in a place where I think there is a focus on great education and what that means inside Dartmouth, but also for the community it anchors.
Well, it's been a pleasure really talking to you today. You're just an inspiration for a lot of women that aspire to leadership in higher ed and in many other industries. So thank you so much for your time.
Wow. It's really fun, and I'm really looking forward to working with you.
Me as well. Thank you.